So to get started, what is a brand? A brand is much more than a name, a logo, and advertising. Of course, those pieces make up a brand, but a brand is more than that. It represents your organization. It symbolizes what your organization does, its values and ethos to the outside world. If carefully planned, a brand can provide your organization with its founding principles and a structure to operate from for many years. And something I forgot to mention in my intro here is obviously we do a lot of work with business clients through our newspaper and through branding, but as evident by the people who we've worked with brands here, we do a lot for nonprofits as well. And when we're talking today about branding and storytelling specifically for nonprofits, to be honest with you, there's not that big of a difference. You'll see when we get into some of the SWOT analysis, that changes a little bit versus if we were working for a business. But really, a nonprofit should think of themselves and think of their branding and marketing and storytelling and advertising with the same strategy that a business would use. There's no reason that it should be different. You guys have competitors. You guys have the same it's different but similar. So when we're going through a rebrand process with a business or nonprofit, they look really similar. So I just want to say that when we're talking about organization here, this is directed toward nonprofits, but it's really similar. So we kind of covered what a brand is, right? It's more than just what makes up the brand. So why does it matter? A strong brand encapsulates the qualities, strengths, position, and vision of an organization. Your brand is what identifies you to your community and to your users. So what can a brand do for you? Why is this here? Why is this important to you? Essentially, the most important thing a brand can do for you is paint 1,000 words, right? Your brand is an opportunity to be unique and say in a single image why someone should commit to your organization. Ultimately the reason for investing time and money into your brand is to add value. And as we said, brands are more than just names, colors, and logos. I'm going to give the classic example of the McDonald's golden arches. You see that anywhere in the world, and you know what you're going to get. You know what that symbolizes. It can bring up thoughts, feelings. You know what you're getting when you see that. Well-developed brands evoke emotion and a promise of what it will deliver. So you know when you see the arches, for instance, what you're going to get. You know when you see the community foundation logo, hopefully everyone in this room understands, okay, we know what they are. We know what that means. In a cluttered world where people are time compressed, brands are shortcuts to help consumers make decisions. So in the case of nonprofits, that could be the decision to donate, the decision to sponsor a nonprofit event, the decision to volunteer, to join your board, or on the other side, it could even help make someone make the decision to reach out for help because they see your brand, they know what you offer, and they feel comfortable reaching out to you because of that. So how do you build a brand? So we do this through a series of steps. A full rebrand or building a new brand is a months-long process. This isn't something that happens overnight. It's not just someone creating a logo on a computer. There's a lot of research that goes into this process. And like I said, it takes months and there's a reason behind all of that, which is what you'll see. So this is just a snapshot of what it looks like to do that for us. The first thing that we do when we're starting a rebrand is a brand audit. So this allows our team to get to know your organization as it stands today. Ideally, this would include employee or volunteer surveys. We're going to ask the people who work closely with the brand some questions. We're going to ask your customers or, in nonprofits' case, your users. Okay, if you've utilized the nonprofit in some way, we're going to ask those questions. We're going to do a community focus group. That's where we do a call out to the community and anybody can attend the focus group. And we're going to ask a series of questions and get to know more about where your brand stands that way. We're also going to do a controlled focus group, which is where we pinpoint certain people to invite to the focus group and ask them questions about the brand as it exists today. During this audit, we also ask our clients to do a couple of exercises. So this is where I'm going to put you to work a little bit. And your worksheet, the first question that we would ask any client during a brand audit, when we're in the survey process, we'll ask you to write down 3 words that you would like associated with your brand. So if you take a minute to do that, so 3 words that you want people to think about, or you want your team to think about, or you want your board to think about when they think of you. Is there anyone willing to share some of those words? Can't think of the can't share. Yes. I love that, and I noticed that you didn't say books, because that's what everyone thinks of when they think library, and you want them to think beyond that, which is exactly the idea of branding, to see that logo and not just think, "Oh, yeah, okay, I can get books there," because clearly there's a lot more going on. Anyone else share a couple words? Yeah. Yeah. Those are great. So the next exercise we ask people to do, and this is why you have crayons on your table, is to draw an image of what you want to come to mind when people think of your brand. We asked everyone to do this, and usually everyone's like, "No, I'm not an artist." Or board members say, "Why would you have us do this?" And I'll explain why. Because sometimes you can't put into words what you want your brand to represent, right? It's more of a feeling or an image. And there's another crazy reason why we have people do this, because a large part of what makes up your brand is your logo. Well, I do all this research and then I work with our graphics team to develop a logo. When I come to them, I come with them with to words and the research, but I also bring these drawings. I collect the drawings from the surveys we do and the boards we do. And I'm not kidding you, usually one of the logo options stems from a drawing done during the research process because we need to know what the people inside the organization want people to think of when they think of their brand. Our graphics team doesn't know that being in an office. They can read the research, they can listen to me share about the research, but these drawings really do help put a visualization to your brand. So, take some time to do a little sketch. Okay, I know that was a brief amount of time, but anybody willing to share kind of what they're working on or what they're going for with their sketch? You're new. What do you No. Yeah, it's Michelle.
So when I have a sort of like, it's just a, obviously simple image, I have like three people who would represent three various ages, backgrounds, but just the thought of them looking happy and healthy
Mhm.
would be kind of the symbol that I was thinking of.
Mhm. Mhm. I like it. Anybody else? Yes, Danielle.
I always had this vision of like a book with like a tree of knowledge coming out of it, with like kind of like maybe the treetops having like little leaves of like different literacy objectives or things like that.
I like that. And that speaks to your literacy word that you want people to think of. And yes, there's books, but it's more, and all of it leads to that. Yeah. Any questions about this part of the process so far, or why we do this, or what we're going to do with this information? No? Okay. The other thing that happens during this brand audit, and thank you everyone for sharing. I think this is, even if you didn't have the chance to think of those 3 words or a sketch today, what I hope is it puts in your mind kind of what we're trying to do when we're building a brand. I mean, ultimately, you want your brand to achieve those ideals that you've kind of written down and sketched. So, appreciate you sharing. The other thing we do during the audit, which I mentioned earlier in our talk today, is the SWOT analysis. So that's a strength, weaknesses, opportunities, threats analysis. And that's when we look at your competitors. Now, obviously, when we do this with a business, that's easy, right? We know who a business competitors are. Now, when we do it with a nonprofit, it's a little bit different because nonprofits don't so much have competitors, although Nancy might disagree with that because she's competitive. So, how we do it usually for a nonprofit is we look at the other nonprofits within a community because as I mentioned, your brand is a snapshot to help people make a decision. And like I said, if they're deciding to donate or volunteer or serve on a board, even in Lapeer County alone, that's a lot of competition among nonprofits, right? And so how do you rise to the top, and how do you, or even better, how do you find the right people to serve? Because you have to tell them who you are through your brand. So when we do a SWOT analysis for nonprofit, we do it a couple ways. We look at your competitors, which is the other nonprofits in your organization. We also look at similar organizations outside of the county. So when we did the brand for the community foundation, we looked at surrounding community foundations. We did the same thing for the library. So, I'll spend a day going to like the Oxford Library and saying like, okay, what is it like here? What is their brand like? Who are they serving? What do they have? And we kind of compile that information. That helps us see where you're already winning, where you're already above the rest, and where you have room to grow. And that analysis, obviously, this is a lot of research. It takes a while, but that's really helpful because it helps us understand what we need to put in your brand to make sure that you come out on top. So again, this is significant because it offers a snapshot in time relative to your current brand status. And this research helps us see what membership, leadership, volunteers, users, what they see your brand as is now, and then what they want it to be. Because when we're doing those surveys of users and volunteers, we're asking them the same thing. What are 3 words that you think represents the Child Advocacy Center? What are 3 words that you think should represent the child advocacy? And we're reading all of that research and we're taking all of that into consideration when we work on a brand. And so what we do once we've done all of this research and compiled everyone's answers and we've read through it, we've sorted through it, we create 2 important lists. One is previous brand descriptors. So that's words and phrases that keep coming up in surveys and conversations and focus groups when we ask people what do they think your brand is today, right? Then we create a list of updated brand descriptors, which are the keywords and phrases that keep coming up when we ask people, what do you want your brand to be? How do you want to be perceived? So those are important lists because they lead us, all the research in those lists lead us to step 2, which is building your brand identity. So of course, this is one of the most important aspects of your brand because this is all of the pieces, right? All the pieces except for your logo, which comes next. But the brand identity reflects what your organization does and what it stands for. It represents who a nonprofit is at its core, and it determines how users will identify and judge you. So in your list there, you have what an brand identity includes. It includes your brand promise. This is a one-sentence promise that matters to your audience, is unique to you, and above all, believable. The promise should indicate what your product is and who it is for. The second piece is a tagline. I think most people are familiar with what a tagline is. We could probably recite a lot of popular taglines. So this is meant to serve as a overarching statement that does not alienate one specific division of an organization. Rather, it sums up the organization in a memorable, concise soundbite. And so there's a few people here, like I said, I worked on their brands. So tagline for the Community Foundation, give today, impact tomorrow. The tagline for the library, where your story begins. The tagline for Child Advocacy Center, lighting the way for a child's future. So these are taglines that our team helped build based on all of that research and based on those brand descriptors. And so you'll see sometimes people have their tagline under their logo, and usually we have a logo version with both. But again, it's that concise soundbite that's out there representing your brand. Your identity also includes your vision statement. So this is a desired outcome for your organization in 5 to 10 years. So this is your reach aspirational stretch statement. It's the purpose and value of an organization. So again, vision is out there 5 to 10 years. It includes your mission statement. So your mission statement describes the fundamental purpose of an organization. It explains why it exists. The mission statement serves as a guidepost for the type of performance expected to achieve the desired results, ultimately supporting the vision statement. So what do you do? How do you do it? And how is that going to lead to what you want your organization to be in 5 to 10 years? A mission statement should be actionable, clear, concise, and reflect your beliefs and values. This is also where your elevator speech comes in. And I think most people are familiar with that. The point of an elevator speech is it's what you would say to someone in a brief amount of time to get them interested to learn more. Brief amount of time being like a ride in an elevator. That's where the name comes from. So if somebody says, what do? You can quickly explain in your elevator speech, what do you do? Where do you work? And this is kind of how how I think of an elevator speech. When we do a brand for an organization, we always write an elevator speech. We have an elevator speech. What I've learned in, a couple of decades of doing this is that chances of everyone in your organization remembering the elevator speech the way that you've written it, word for word, is not likely. And that's okay. The important part is that they're keeping with the key words and phrases, and the idea is there, the sentiment is there. So it's important to have people in your organization know the elevator speech, recite it, get to know it, but then have them tweak it to their own, how they would talk. So it comes naturally when they're talking to people in the organization. And then this is also where we develop your brand standard sheet. So this is really important. This is a set of standards regarding your fonts, colors, logos. And this ensures that your new brand is protected and it adds value to the organization. We were talking this morning before we got started about colors and brand colors. I didn't go into that too much. That's usually when we get to logo, but I want to say that when we pick colors for a brand, that is very meaningful. There's a reason behind every color we pick. So you have to create brand standards so that someone then doesn't take your logo and put it somewhere in pink, for instance, because there's a reason we chose blue and green, this exact blue and green that has exact number codes. There's a reason we chose this for the Community Foundation. There's a reason we chose the colors for the other organizations in this room. And so the brand standards ensure that nobody takes your logo and, like I said, makes it pink. Now, let's say that they want your logo on a pink banner and your colors don't go with that. That's why we always include a black and a white version. Nothing wrong with that. That is okay to have a black and white version of your logo. But the standards ensure that nobody's taking it and nobody's changing the font all of a sudden. Because what happens, like, let's say your logo starts showing up in pink or different fonts, people start to be like, well, is that the same community foundation that I went to their nonprofit workshop? Because I feel like I remember everything being blue and green and this. So that's the brand standards document is really like, I love them. They're a one sheeter that is a no-brainer in how to keep your brand strong because you can hand the sheet to everyone you do business with and say like, okay, these are our rules and how you utilize our brand. So that's one of my favorite parts of building a brand, 'cause a lot of times when we come in to do that, a brand has been tweaked and changed a lot, and that's kind of sometimes what the suffering is and taking away the strength. So I love the brand standard sheet. Um, so backing up a bit, I think I mentioned when we're having people do their version of the elevator speech, that's okay if they change a little bit, but we wanna make sure they have keywords and phrases. When you get your brand identity or you look at a brand's brand identity sheet, you're going to see repeated keywords and phrases. And chances are a lot of them came from that updated brand descriptor list that we created at the end of step one. And so I always think of it like if you typed up all of your brand identity on a sheet and did like a word search, you're going to see repeated words, and that's the point. We want to have those same words repeated. Like if you did it for Community Foundation, you're going to see the word impact in there a lot because that's not only is it in their tagline, it's in a lot of their identity pieces too, and that's by design. So when we're having the board or the staff give their elevator speech, it might be a little bit different, but chances are everyone's gonna say the word impact in there because it's such a big part of the brand and what the foundation does. So, just something to think about, that it's okay to repeat, that's the point of it. Which brings me to the one thing that I'd say if you take nothing else away today, take this away. A strong brand is built with consistency and frequency. So your brand has to show up the same way, the same color, the same fonts, the same logo, the same tagline. It has to stay consistent and it has to be frequent. You have to take your brand and put it out in as many places as humanly possible over and over and over again. Consistency and frequency. That is how you build a strong brand. Okay, that was a lot of information about brand identity. Anything before we move on to the communication piece of it? Yeah. Yeah.
The library it public Texas, we didn't have like our logo was literally like 47 years old, and we are fortunate that one of our library's clerks was a graphic designer, and my assistant director at Big Pump Marketing was like Carl Cruz's sister, and they did go around and just like kind of like, okay, these are gonna be our colors, and then this is what we're gonna put the same font, the same scheme, the same and at first, I was kind of like, it is good lord. Like, like, I don't know if people seeing nonfiction, fiction, all the same. But it really did begin to, like, as wherever we put that was like a place that they needed to look at. Oh, that was that library. It's just kind of like, but yeah, it really did make a huge impact because the minute we could just put our little logo out there, we'd have like little poker chips that do it people and stuff like that. They do, exactly, like, that's the library that's over there on the base at the bottom of it, blah, 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 it just made that connection.
Yes.
So it really made huge difference for us.
Thank you. Yeah, and before you came to Lapeer, that's what was happening there too before we did that brand, which is really common, right? Someone created a logo eons ago that's been photocopied and pasted and made every color for every holiday, and that's just the way that it's been done. But and of course that's what was happening in Lapeer too. And it was that, okay, we need to make it consistent and we need to make sure that people know when they see that that means Lapeer District Library, that means Community Foundation. Yeah. Nothing wrong with that. That's something that happens over time to organizations, and that's why it's important to take a look at your brand and say, "Okay, is it time for us to tighten this up and go through a process like that?" Yeah. Did you say something, Nancy?
I was gonna say also, and from experience, those y'all know words and me, but it's very important to have those words. So is it this whether it's staff or board, you can really easily get into a case of telephone where everyone's using a slightly different version of the bird, but it doesn't represent what. And so
Those lines.
it has to be educating not only your internal team, but your board and people in the community that this is what we do. Because even a slight change, especially in philanthropy, could look something totally different. The child advocacy center, two different words, all of a sudden you aren't providing the services that you are providing. And people get a missense of what it is. So, we've been very consistent. And it's not always fun to have
What do you mean? I think this is really fun.
if you frequently get eye rolling and we don't want to do this and how old are we but then we really have to sit down and in G sets and say what we do. And I mean I'm just as guilty of you kinda blah 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 blah. Well, I'm confused, you're confused games. So those we're very consistent about and intentional about the person described.
And no shame in doing homework because I should have said this beginning. I'm on the community foundation board now. I joined the board after we did the branding project, and we're, as all nonprofits, right? We are always in recruitment mode. And one of our newest board members is a younger person that I personally was really encouraging to come on the board. And we're at our event, the Giving Tuesday event. And he's like, "So what do you," and I was like, I was like, "What do you, why do I like, you got to stay on top of this stuff because even though I was part of the team that developed it, even though I'm on the board, even though this is what I do for a living, I get in my newspaper mode, right? I get in like View newspaper group and telling our story, knowing that. But it's important to any organization you're a part of that you're really familiar with these pieces. So, yeah, even though this is done, right? Like we checked it off, we did the Community Foundation brand, the board has it, the team has it. You still have to study it. It's not a one and done thing, it's an everyday thing. And just as you said, you work really hard to tell the community your story. Every business has to do that, every nonprofit has to do it, but internally you have to do it too. So, no shame in rereading and being ready because I was like, yeah, that's really good information that I know what I wanna say, but, you can be stumped even when you're part of it, so never a bad idea to polish up. Yes.
So, is there never a bad time to rethink everything? Because my brand, which I just made up 7 years ago, had no concept of really thinking it up. I'm really thinking it does not represent whatsoever. Does it say anything? So it's just perfectly fine, after 7 years, to say, "Hey, well, LED."
Yeah.
It's never a bad time to just completely change.
There's never a bad time to completely change at all, even if for some reason you've changed a year ago and now something has changed. View is in that mode constantly because we're growing constantly. So my elevator speech has to change, for instance, all the time because we were 7 papers, 12 papers, 14 papers, 20 papers. So not only is it never a bad time to rethink the whole thing and go through the process and do it, 7 years is an appropriate time, especially with what you do. I'm gonna think that a lot has changed in 7 years. So no, not a bad time, and it's not a bad time to tweak pieces of it either. The foundation has tweaked pieces of their brand since forming it 8 or 9 years ago because things change, and so, yeah, this stuff is written down, but I should say and it's consistency is important, so this is a mixed message, consistency is important, but you also have to be a little bit fluid. right? And that, okay, the core values are staying, our core keywords and phrases. But if the number of papers we have or the number of funds we have change, and then in your case, if you're like, hey, we never set these things in stone to begin with, it's time to look at that and do that. You might find that some of the work you did 7 years ago still holds true and holds value and like may, like the name or the colors stay the same, but you line up these other pieces so that it all makes sense, right? Like why I'm gonna guess the reason you did some of the things you did 7 years ago is still gonna make sense today, right? Yeah. So no, there's not ever a bad time to do branding. It's never too late. It's never too early. It's important at all stages of your organization.
And for us, it was part of like relevancy. I mean, obviously, so golden arches haven't changed, but I that
Well, they have, yeah. Yeah, they have, yeah.
the first of it. For us, it's, are we staying relevant in the community? Are viewed as your grandfather's organization? Heck, you don't want to be part of. And so there is that relevancy of the times.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
You see the like where you had rebranded something and you see like an immediate change. Well, you find like a lot of times it takes time. Have you been involved with something like once it's rebranded, has it just take off? Or?
I mean, I think initially, like let's say you're doing a full rebrand, you're gonna see immediate results because of the communication and the launch that we'll talk about those steps. Because when you launch a brand, it's a huge celebration, right? Like we're announcing this new brand or new pieces of a brand. And we'll talk about this. Sometimes we have an event to go along with it. So the reaction immediately is usually quite intense, right? You get a lot of interest in what's happening. If you're networking with people, they'll often go, oh my gosh, I saw your new logo, or that's great and that's exciting you're doing that. I think what more happens is like that lull. Like, I think you're gonna see immediate impact, and then you have this lull, and that's kind of what Pete will talk about. Okay, so we've done the exciting, really fun, big splash. Everyone's really interested in commenting on it. That's kind of load. Okay, now how do we make sure that there's still value in all the work that we've done in getting it out there? And so that's where, and I think a lot of that is what has been talked about in these previous workshops, right? Like, okay, how do you keep out there in front of people and keep present? And that is what Pete will talk about later today. So I think you're always going to see the initial, like, it is a big deal. And then the work really, this is work. That's fun. And then the work is keeping it out there. Yeah.
And also be prepared uh, for some kind of that reaction. Chase hard. And so are excited that pair to buy guns in our case that falters that follows a community foundation that literally up and said, I don't like it.
right. This is the year you come make you by ADU 27 years ago, and this I don't know why you did it. It's a waste of money, and I kept explain. Oh, then see, this is why it's the profit.
And over time they come to accept this. It's not just like, oh, we want Chinese state. But they compared that.
Yeah.
That was a widespread, but
Oh, yeah. I mean, I am a person that loves and thrives on change, partially why I'm in this business and every day is different. But yeah, change is hard. I mean, there's been many times where I've been presenting to a board that's already decided that they're doing this, and the board members are like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to fill out the survey. And I'm like, so it's just kind of constantly reassuring and saying, no, this is a good thing and this will be. And I feel like 99.9% of people come around it and say, "Oh, this is good. Like it did need a refresh," or, "Oh yeah, okay, I'm glad we're thinking about it that way." Yeah. So after we have those pieces in place, we move to step 3, which is communication, and this is where the logo is actually built. We do the brand identity first. If you need a name or a name change, this is also the part where we do this. The communication is what people are seeing. Beyond the tagline and hearing the elevator speech, a lot of these brand identity items the public doesn't see, but the communication part is the part that the public will see. So when it comes to building a logo, the way our team does it is we do 2 options usually for a client to take a look at. And again, this isn't just, being created in a silo. This is based on all of the research and all of the conversations and a lot of digging on what colors we think will work and all that sort of thing. So 2 options, and then we bring that to the necessary people to kind of make a decision or tweak as needed. The communication step is also where the team is going to build things like brochures, letterhead, business cards, your print advertising pieces. It's where we write a press release about the brand and talk about, hey, we're moving toward that launch phase. What does that look like? This is also the phase where your website and social media accounts would be updated appropriately given the new branding pieces. So again, this is the step where okay, we've done the research, we've done the work. This is where you're really going to start to see a lot of it out there in the world and people will start to see it. You're really going to see the hard work pay off. And then really soon or in conjunction with that communication piece is when we talk about a launch, what we're going to do to launch a new brand. That looks different for every client. If you know what I talked to a bunch of chamber members about this process not too long ago. And of course, ribbon cuttings are something chamber members are all familiar with. Sometimes an organization will do a ribbon cutting, to celebrate a new brand or an anniversary. And that's one way to do it. You can host just an event at your organization to announce it. It doesn't have to be tied in any other organization. Sometimes the launch is just a series of print ads, right? And press releases. Maybe it doesn't include an event. So we talk about that with the client. What is the best way to get this information out there so that people see it? Last thing you want to happen is to have done all this work, created all this beautiful art pieces and hard work, and then have no one see it. So we want to launch as an important part of how we're going to get this out there. A brand strength depends on a lot of factors, but it's important, like we talked about, to get that buy-in from everyone. Leaders and team members at every level have to commit to the brand, including the new logo, the new tagline, the new mission, the new vision. So kind of what Danielle mentioned, you can't have these old versions creaking back in once the new brand is out there. The old brand has to go away. You have to make sure that all your brochures and business cards are updated and we're not utilizing cold taglines and things like that. So I have never encountered that really happening on purpose. Maybe that happens on accident in a case, but really usually by the time we get to a brand launch, because we've done the surveys, because we've done the focus groups, there's buy-in from every level of an organization because they're excited about it. They know this has been being worked on. And again, that happens way back when we're asking employees or volunteers, what do you want to see done with this organization? So that's how that buy-in begins, is getting people involved in every step of the way. And so when it's actually new and launched, it's not hard to have everyone committed at every level. And so like we talked about, we'll take a little break, but I want to say that with your brand solidly in place, kind of what I said to Michelle, then it kind of moves on to Pete's end of today's workshop, kind of talking about how are you going to utilize your brand and storytelling to keep the excitement out there, to keep the education part out there for nonprofits especially. And so he'll talk about that. And before break, any initial other questions for me before we do that? Okay, thank you. And my name, email, phone number is on the worksheet. So if you start thinking about things later today or this week or whatever and want to talk more about it, or certainly at the end of today, I'm happy to answer any questions. So thank you for your time, and we'll do a little break now.
Cool. Well, thank you guys for all being here today. I think marketing, advertising, branding is so important for your business, and there's a lot of businesses out there that don't put the time and effort into that, and it's vital for your business. So thanks for all being here today. My name's Pete Clinton. I'm the advertising director for the View newspaper group. I'm in charge of the revenue for the company. Um, I've been with the View for 10 years. I'm going on my 11th year this year. But prior to that, I was with a group of radio stations for 15 years, a group of radio stations in Flint. So I've been doing local marketing with local businesses and organizations for a little bit over 25 years. So I've been able and had the opportunity to work with many great organizations, seeing a lot of successes, seeing a lot of challenges throughout my time, but love advertising, love marketing. And today we're going to talk a little bit about storytelling. And I think storytelling has become so important to a local business. I think, one of the things that, why is storytelling key to your business? You make an emotional connection. People are drawn to good stories. And think about that. When you tell a story to somebody, Think about their engagement. Think about how they're looking at you. Think about what they're thinking about. A story are also 22 times more memorable than facts. In a quote I saw somewhere, facts tell, stories sell, right? So tons of facts in all our businesses, whether you're a business, whether you're a local nonprofit, there's tons of facts that you guys always have access to, right? But how do you develop those into a story? It makes such a bigger impact when you're telling that story. Um, One of the things that we at the View really focus on the last couple of years, and one of our initiatives is be a really good storyteller. And the reason why we have to be a good storyteller is because when you hear about the newspaper world in general, you don't hear too many good things about out there, still good stories about the newspaper, right? But with our group and our growth and what we've been able to do, we have a great story that we can share with the community, with local businesses. Um, and I think being able to tell that story about what we're able to do and about our growth helps us grow, helps us communicate to the community on what we exactly do. And that's a big part of our growth and being able to tell that story. So, um, wanted to talk a little bit about some of the, I mean, there's tons of ways to tell your story, but I wanted to talk a little bit about like the 5 things that I feel like are important to always have in your story. So, but before we do that, who can tell me, there's tons of ways we can tell a story, right? What are some of the ways that we can tell our story? Like, what are some of the vehicles that we have out there that we can use to tell our story? Reels. Be more descriptive. Social media. We can tell our story through social media. How else? Word of mouth, referrals, right? Presentations, like speaking to a group. We can tell our story by speaking to a group. What else? Newspaper. We tell our story through the newspaper. We tell tons of stories. What else? Magazines. Posters, flyers, commercial, TV, right? Tell your story through video. Special events. Tell your story through doing local events. What about images? Tell your story through images. How many people have seen like whether it's a print ad or a TV commercial that just only has images that tell the story, right? I think UPS did that a long time ago. They were drawing their story on their TV commercials. So tons of way to tell a story, right? There's tons of different ways, and everything sort of merges together. All those things together, like what Emily said, with your brand, all those things have to align. And, before we ever get to the storytelling part, we always have to make sure the branding part, you guys have a strong brand. That is so important before you get to the storytelling part. I was at a presentation a couple weeks ago with a marketing company, and they said something that really hit it very well with marketing. There's so many businesses out there that do, marketing, and they say, "Oh, it didn't work." And they don't think the advertising worked. Whether it was social media, whether it was TV, whether it was print, whether it was radio, but the business has to ask the question, was it a marketing problem or was it a brand issue? Right? Was how strong was the brand? And did that affect the marketing side of it? So remember that. What Emily said about the brand is so important in developing your story. You got to have a strong brand. So I want to go through this a little bit and talk about, the 5 elements that I think each nonprofit should use when telling their story. And the first one is know your audience. And I think I put an exclamation point at the end of this one. I think this one is so vitally important. In today's world, we talked about all the different ways we can tell our story. There's tons of different ways out there. But who's your audience? Who are you telling your story to? How are you communicating to them? And when we talk to a lot of local organizations, we ask that's one of the first questions that we ask to the local business or local organization. Who are you targeting? And a lot of them say, "Oh, everybody." Then we, talk about defining that target. Know who you're talking to, who you want to target. So if I ask the question right now, I'm going to put Matt on the spot, who is your audience at the CAC? Yeah.
Well, it's mostly it's potential donors and volunteers because we're not looking for customers
Mm-hmm.
in the typical way.
Mm-hmm.
So I think people in the community who can understand what we do and share that with others who might be able to support us and help us out.
So almost maybe like two stories. I mean, you volunteers and then donors. I think those are two different stories probably for each, right?
Yeah.
And then if I asked you like who are your donors, how can you really define like that core? Like who would that be? If you had to think about that, a little bit, and if you guys are looking for donors per se for your nonprofit, who is that? Are they business owners? Are they, how old are they? Really paint the demographic profile of who you're trying to talk to when developing your story. So take a second real quick and just sort of write down like who would be your who's your audience? Who are you telling your story to? I'll give one example. Do you guys remember the Old Spice, the man your man could smell like campaign? Long time ago. I think Old Spice, was selling men's, products. And at the time they were targeting men was their audience, right? And sales were down. They couldn't figure out, why. They did some research. They did a whole brand audit, like what Emily was talking about. And they realized that women purchased, I think it was like 70 to 75% of those products for men. So Old Spice was talking to the wrong person when they were wanting to have them buy their product. So they changed their message. They had the tagline, "The man your man could smell like," and it was one of the most successful campaigns out there. So it's a really good example of know who you're talking to. They had a great story, but they weren't talking to the right people, and it made all the difference in the world. Does anybody want to share what they had? Yeah.
Well, first and foremost, our audience is the public because that's who we serve is the public. But also, as you had indicated, like donors, for me specifically, it's fight. We call them finders, the people that find a fawn that will fleet to help figure out what to do with the fawn. And also law enforcement. We do a lot of work with law enforcement.
Okay. So when you're maybe tailoring your message, you're with law enforcement, you're tailoring that message specifically for
Yep.
their lifestyle.
I have presentations right specifically for.
Yep, great. Anyone else? Okay. So the second thing on the list is what are your business and brand values? So Emily talked a little bit about this. In some examples of a business or brand value are you community minded? Are you passionate? Are you knowledgeable? Are you a resource in the community? How dedicated are you? How trustworthy is your organizations? In integrity and service oriented. Those are some of the things of having a good, brand values. So it needs to be incorporated in your story because I'll give an example. Me and my wife, last winter, we went to a place in downtown Rochester. It was called Holy Cannoli. It closed at 9 o'clock. We were down there like 8:50. We just had dinner. We wanted to get like a little dessert. And we saw that they were getting ready to close up. And so, we were sort of tentative walking in. I think we've all experienced that with any business. They're going to be like, oh, they're not going to want to serve us. They were trying to close up. And, you get different kinds of reactions. But when we walked in that place, we eventually the owners were in there. We didn't know the owners at the time, but they were so inviting and so come on in and showing us their whole process of how they made the cannoli and all the things that they have and all the decorations they have out in front of their store. And they told us a story on how they got that from the old Hudson's down in Detroit. A lot of the stories, so it was a good example to share because they could have easily been like, "Oh, we're locking up in 5 or 10 minutes," and put that sour taste in our mouth and be like, "Well, we're not gonna come back." But they were so inviting and so customer service was solid, so friendly that we'll go back there. We're definitely going to be going back, so it's a good example of there's a good example of a brand value that when you telling your story, what are your business and brand values? I think a lot of people care about integrity. They care about, are you trustworthy? Care about what you do in the community. I think you guys all get those questions, especially if you're talking to donors. They're definitely wanting to know that information. So that's always vital to have in part of your story. when you look at, you can take those with you on the count on the tables there's a 4-page piece about our story and a piece in there about how we're community minded and how much we give back to the community. That's a big value for our business. Super important. Um, the third thing is define your core message. And it's really simple. Your organization helps your customer solve their problem. It's as simple as that. Your core message. Your organization helps your customer, whether it's a donor, volunteer, whoever your audience is, solve their problem by your solution. Do you have any questions on that? The fourth one is my favorite. It's using customer testimonials, referrals. And we're out and about, we're communicating to volunteers, donors, whoever it may be. We're out there, our staff's out there telling that story. But how much better would it be coming from somebody outside the organization sharing a great testimonial or referral about what your organization does? How much value, guys, do you think that would have? Compared to, if somebody's listening to me talking about advertising, is that going to come better from, maybe Nancy giving a referral about the newspaper? Or is that going to come better from me? I would way rather have Nancy do it than me. So think about that. I don't think businesses use referrals and testimonials enough in their business. I think, we all talk about Google reviews and different things, but I promise you, if you guys created a list of 10 or 15 people that you've done business with or helped out and asked them for a referral or a testimonial, you probably get every one. So I think, think about that. Think about 10 people as a start like that you've, helped along the way or done, that you could use a testimonial referral. And I promise you, you guys will get some really great pieces that will help tell your story.
And then, can you tell me what do we do with that? How do we get that out there? The testimony. That's a great. I love that. It's a great idea. But how do we get that out there?
There's different ways. It's how we talked about the vehicles before. I mean, we take some of our customer testimonials we get and we turn them into maybe 2 or 3 word sentences, get a photo of the person with that gave us a testimonial. We'll put it in our newspaper. That's what we do. But you could put it into your, brochures. You could put it into annual reports, social media, there's tons of ways. You could do videos, there's tons of different ways that you can take those testimonials to share that with everybody. Put them on your websites, you know?
We've become very intentional. I mean, we haven't done that well enough, but we're getting better at it. So if you look at our annual report out on the table, this year it was intentionally picking community leaders, people that would know people across the county and having them put testimonials and tell our story because it's the impact. They don't need us telling, our donors and the community doesn't need to hear our story. They need to hear Mr. Fish up in North Branch saying this has been a good thing for students.
Mhm.
And he's a trusted person in the community, but then people build that connection.
Absolutely.
I think for you guys too, like, sorry to interject, but if you're thinking testimonials, and it would be important to get them from, let's say, major sponsors who say, hey, I'm proud to be associated with this camp because it gives me exposure to the kind of, community-minded people that I want to be, around. So, better worded than that, obviously, but that's going to be important too because that will let other major sponsors and donors know, like, oh yeah, that's a great organization to be involved in because you're going to get the eyes and ears of the people that they know.
Does that help?
That's wonderful.
Okay. Okay. And the last thing I have on this list is it says be authentic and consistent. Be yourself, be consistent. practice. Emily talked about the consistency and, how she sometimes gets caught off guard. I sometimes get caught off guard. Everybody does, right? But the more we practice telling our story, the better we're going to get, you know? So, I think it's every piece of communication, no matter what you do, people notice. You might not think they notice, but they notice. They see you at presentations. They see you out in the community. They might see something on social media. They might see something in the newspaper. Every communication counts, and it's hard to really quantify like, oh, who's all seeing it. I can promise you everybody is. Just because they're not telling you or seeing you or telling you directly and you're wondering, wow, is anybody even seeing this? I promise you they are. That's why you got to be yourself, be consistent, and have that message repeat over and over and over again. Marketing, branding, storytelling all work together, and it's one of the hardest things out there to do. I've been doing this for 25 years. Marketing, the businesses and organizations that stay consistent with it and find a way to be consistent no matter what vehicle they're using have the best results. Just remember that. Find ways to be consistent in your messaging and your branding and your marketing. And I promise you, over time, you guys will see a difference. Promise you. So I wanted to take a quick second after you combine those 5 things and take maybe like 5 quick minutes and just, develop a story based on the information that you have written down real quick. And maybe we'll ask a few people to share their story. Does anybody want to share theirs? Okay.
I'm gonna have to read it because I don't remember.
Okay.
So, George Fawn Rescue is a licensed wildlife rehabilitation organization specializing in whitetail fawns, serving Lapeer County and the surrounding area, providing compassionate care to injured and orphaned fawns and educational opportunities to the community.
Great. Anyone? Michelle?
So I don't have mine written down in exact words.
Yeah.
But the concept is like our focus is Lapeer County residents, and we can offer services, great services to them in their hometown. So we don't want people to think they need to go to Flint or Detroit or wherever what kind of services they may need. We are providing those right here in Lapeer County, and you'll still get like the same top care. So stay home, stay in your hometown, be treated by people you know, like the nurses and employees, they know all kinds of the patients, so it's kind of more of a feeling where you don't have so much anxiety coming in. You feel like you're at home, you know where you're going, that whole thing. So that's kind of our premise is we can deliver the same world-class care and provide service right here in your hometown.
It's great. And you guys give a lot back in the community. So if somebody's very community minded, wants to do some business or with an organization that gives back, that's one of their brand values right there. One more.
I was thinking about, I was actually not thinking about the advocacy center. I was thinking about Camp Spyline, where Nadia was my wife's the director, and I was there a number of years. And for years, we've told stories of like, here's kids canoeing and doing archery and, making new friends and all those really positive things, which I think you'd expect to hear from a camp, right? And it's better to put that message out. And we were just chatting just for a second there. I was thinking about, it'd be interesting to add to that stories of here's what happens when your kid breaks their thumb. Here's what happens when you show up late to pick them up. When they get sick at camp, because parents know those things are going to happen. And I think it would be really interesting to sort of present a sense of like, this is how we respond to that. Because I think they probably in a way care about those things more than whether the kid's going to be good at canoe or archery.
I think that's a great idea because when you think about that, who's the audience? It's parents worried about like, okay, what if something happened to my kid at the camp? So there's who the audience is, and crafting the story where a brand value could be the compassion of the camp, the trust of the camp, all those kind of things that tie into that story. Um, but remember that's specific. That's a great example of specifically targeting somebody. Camp could say, oh yeah, we're just targeting, families with kids, young kids between the ages of 5 to 12 years old. I'm not sure what the ages are or anything like that, but that's a lot more well defined in terms of, okay, that's one story that's going on at that camp. So it's a good example.
So one of our examples is most people know here is our Giving Tuesday campaign, and as we see around the room, we've been one of our audiences and stories we're trying to tell is how are we, because we say we connect resources. That's our bottom line of what we do is we connect capital and human resources for community impact. And so we've been intentional about having donors during Giving Tuesday make the presentations to the nonprofit and direct it towards a grant. And so the storytelling is these check presentations that you see of, oh, here's a donor that felt strongly about the Child Advocacy Center, and now they're seeing the impact of it. And the behind the scenes is that we're helping facilitate that and that level of trust that donor is working with us or that fund is working with us. So it really makes those connections and that storytelling, um, meaningful because they chose to give the grant for these particular reasons, and it could be a life circumstances or a need or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So that's been one way to hit part of our audience.
I think it's a great example. And the other thing that I think you're tackling with that is, you have testimonials of people that have donated to the community foundation. And the next story part of that is, okay, look at how they wanted the money to go, their money to go here, So I think that's another good example too of a referral testimonial of somebody, being a part of the community foundation to see what the outcome is.
I want to say for Michelle's example, you talk about testimonials. Don't feel like you have to have necessarily share the person's name or the testimonial when you're sharing a story. Michelle could tell a great story, and that because of the work the foundation has done, this equipment now exists in Lapeer County, which means that I know a patient who had extreme anxiety about the idea of having to drive an hour and a half for a treatment or a test, and thanks to the work of the foundation and its donors and its volunteers, they didn't have to do that. And maybe you talk to, I'm sure you have talked to a person who that has occurred for, and you can kind of share the sentiment of what they said. You don't have to share their name, but I think that that's such a, what you were saying in your story is so important, and it's okay to say like, no, this is actually what happened. And the person maybe wasn't going to get a test, and they got it. They didn't have to drive an hour and a half. So those are important stories. And then for lawn rescue, not only are you helping the animal, which would pull heartstrings for some people, but tell the story of like speaking of anxiety, the anxiety you produced of a person who found the lawn and had no idea what to do. Because that's probably pretty relatable, and there's a lot of people out there that don't know what to do and don't want to worry about it or stress about it, and you help ease their,
It's amazing how many people are crying on the phone.
Yeah.
There's a fawn in their yard and they don't know what to do.
totally, yes. And you're thinking like, and it's someone who probably didn't even know that they cared about a baby fawn, but now that they've seen it, they do, and you help alleviate the
Yep.
stress of what to do about that.
I'll
And
come
I
off the
think,
cliff all the time.
yeah. So, yeah, it's using a testimonial in a way in your storytelling so people really relate to that.
Think about the impact all your organizations are making in the community. If somebody, came up to, Warren and said, "Man, I never even heard of you. I don't even know what you do." Think about that opportunity. It's like, okay, I have a great opportunity to tell my story and what I do and the impact that, your organization makes in the community. I know that's one of the words of the Lapeer Community Foundation in their brand. However, that should be on everybody's thoughts as a nonprofit, as a local business organization. When you're sharing that story, what impact are you making in the community? You know, what are some of the things that you guys are doing specifically in the community? I know go ahead, Jennifer.
Well, I was just gonna share what I wrote, like, I work for the County Community Foundation, and so, I zoomed in on a more narrower topic. I had a gentleman who needed to take a required minimum distribution, and he wanted to give it to like American Cancer Society or American Red Cross or whatever, and he had done that in the past, but he was never confident that they actually got the money. He wouldn't get a letter, he wasn't sure, so he called me and he said, hey, like, can I send my qualified minimum distributions to you? And so I worked with him on the phone, I said, absolutely. And then I offered him like all of the funds that were available that he could donate to, and I found out like what his passions were, what he cared about most in the community, and he goes, and so, will somebody else call me when that money comes in? And I said, I will call you. And he goes, you're going to call me? And I said, yeah, I'm going to put a sticky note on my computer right now. And he just chuckled and started laughing. We built this rapport. I was super friendly to him. Um, when I got the money in, I immediately called him on the phone, and he goes, imagine that. He goes, you did exactly what you were going to do. You told me you were going to do it. You actually followed through with it. He goes, I have confidence in what you told me now. He goes, you were extremely helpful. You followed through. He goes, now I know when I call you, I'm not going to have to go through 15 different voicemails and people passing me on to other people. He's like, you're trustworthy. You've proven yourself. You were friendly, and now I'm going to be on repeat because I know this is going to work. And I just think that's so important, and he could be like a testimony out into the community without even putting his face out there or his name, or if he wanted to, he could. But just having somebody in your community that can be like a spokesperson or testimonial for your organization to say, like, it was so easy, they were so friendly, I have confidence in their abilities, they did what they said they were going to do. I mean, that's huge.
Well, that's a testament in terms of the community foundation, their brand values, right? You know, hey, integrity, trustworthy, saying what you're going to do. If you say something, got to deliver on it because people will remember. So they have a lifetime, donor, from this person that Jennifer talked to. And, that's why every single piece of communication is important, no matter what it is. It all will add up and make a difference. And so every story is vital. And I know North Brancher's here, and I feel Jim Fish does a good job with his storytelling. He does a great job with his branding and storytelling. When you think from a school district standpoint, a lot of schools might not put the resources into how important that story is. I know Jim feels that's vital to be able to tell that story, what's going on in North Branch schools, and I'm sure Mark can attest to that.
Getting a good reputation takes a lot of effort of everyone, but it can so easily be lost. So we want to constantly be, how we serve the community better, how we serve our students better,
Yeah,
get that message out.
yeah, and it shows. So, does anybody have any other questions or anything else?
Can you talk a little bit about AI as you do your communications? It might be way off track here, but I know we use it
Yeah.
to help us, because you're a small staff, all of you are. I don't know anyone else, but ChatGPT can be a good friend to start helping you craft messages. I think social media. I think, the days of scratching my head and trying to be creative every single time. I don't know if you have thoughts on that or what.
I don't have too many thoughts on it from the advertising side and the marketing side. Emily might have a little bit more. I don't mean to throw it on to you, Em, but I think Emily's, yeah, I think Emily might be better to answer that.
Oh, sure.
I mean, it's a short answer. Um, now I'm gonna give a presentation on AI. Thank you, Nancy. Um, I will say this. Obviously, it's ever changing. Right now, for the newspaper and advertising side of our business, we do not utilize it. It does not serve our needs at this point. It's not reliable for the newspaper side in that you can't it's not, you have to fact check everything. It's more work. We have a team of experts and writers who do that for a living, and it is their job to think creative and do that. And of course, as a newspaper, speaking just specifically about our business, we're held to an extremely high standard about accuracy and truth and all of those things. So right now, as far as the newspaper side of the business, and then we've utilized that same theory in our marketing and advertising. We do not utilize AI. A place where we may look into it is to help on the graphic side of things, and I think to an extent that's what Nancy is referring to. I think when you use in a program like Canva, that may have some AI component in it, which is very helpful. And then also the person who gave the social media 101 presentation discuss how you could use it to generate topics for your social media posts. And I think if you're having a hard time generating topics or starters, that is an A-okay use for it. I just personally, as a creative person and a writer, don't use it, but that is my job to come up with these topics. A lot of you are wearing a million hats, and it is not your job to sit there and think of 365 posts a year. So I think if you can use it for that as a jumping off point and it's helping you, then that's good. That's helpful. But as far as our personal take is we don't use it for that. But yeah. Yeah,
Brainstorming.
exactly. Yep.
I know what I want to say, but I can't.
Yeah. I think if you're using it for that and it's helping, go for it. Is that kind of what the input you were looking for? Yeah. 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 It's obviously very new and there's lots to be discovered. Not to say that it would never be used in that capacity for us, but right now that's not how we're using it. So
Kind of like a lot of other things that are, when they first came out, like it's a tool that you can use, but you have to be aware of the downfalls of it, like, the fact checking and don't think you're gonna write your PhD dissertation with ChatGPT.
Right.
Because they're just gonna make up things when they don't know what it is.
exactly. Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
for like little things, I worked on a building project with somebody at one point, and it was an engineering firm, and they were looking for like potential issues that maybe if they did this or that, and so they would use it in that capacity for brainstorming. Like, we've thought of everything around this table. Is there anything else that maybe with these parameters it could come up with?
Yeah.
And I think you just have to like be smart about it.
Mm-hmm.
Nancy, can I ask from like the grant making perspective, are you finding AI is an element in grant applications that you're seeing increasingly?
I haven't seen it necessarily in the grant applications where we've had lots of discussion about it as not only internally but across the community foundation world
Yeah, that's
is scholarships. So our students are well plugged in to AI. And so when you say, what do you want to do with your degree and how do you want to do in the world, we're getting some essays that if you look at the rest of the application, you're going either mom and dad did it, which has been since history began, or AI. And so there has been an increased look at how important, what importance are we placing on those essays and putting them in the context. It's a tool. Our students are learning that tool and our educators are embracing the tool, but then we have to figure out on the back end. If Sally sounds like she's phenomenal, she's maybe utilizing the tool. She may be a phenomenal writer, but it might not line up with necessarily her English writing.
Yeah.
So we're seeing it much more there.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But no, all of our nonprofits, just like in this room, we can tell you write good, solid narrative.
Oh, good, because ours was totally AI, so I got away with it.
Now I gotta reread the application.
Emily's on our green committee, so
This comes into 7 fingers on it.
Yeah.
We have a little bit more time. Does anybody
Yeah.
have any more questions?
Any tricks, anything you guys have found that really works? I always want to go there and other folks.
If you had a limited budget, because all of this rebranding, maybe you need a new sign out front, you need new signage on your door, you need
I mean, it really depends on each individual organization, right? Because you might need 4 shirts, but someone might need 20. My best advice to that is gather all like you would in any other project, gather all the estimates, the quotes, and plan for it. I don't think that it's reasonable for me to come to a board that has never thought about doing a rebrand and pitch a rebrand, thinking that they're going to do it that year on that budget or in their current budget. Maybe they have internally been planning for it, so they've been moving money around and saving for it, and they're ready to go. But likely when I present to, especially a nonprofit board, it's okay, here's what we offer, here's what the price is, and then they have to work to budget for it. So yeah, and a lot of those things are a one-time expense, right? Like a new sign or clothing or a rebrand. Of course, we're always going to encourage any and every business and every to have marketing in their budget in some capacity, and then when we go to do these larger projects, it's like, "Hey, what do you need to plan for and budget for?" And
This is kind of like a snowball effect, like when you change your branding and you want to be consistent, you kind of have to change everything. So
Yeah.
you kind of have to be prepared for it before you jump in.
exactly, yep, it's not an inexpensive endeavor by any means because you're right, it leads to all new brochures, business cards, apparel, signs, yeah, and so that's why you have to plan for it. Mhm.
And that's hard, right?
Mhm.
We're nonprofits, we're thrifty,
Mhm.
right? Like, I'll use the free pens that I got from my conference until they're dead, because I don't need to buy a pen.
Mhm.
And so when we rebranded, throwing away 9 boxes of folders hurt my nonprofit fund too. Like, I can't afford to throw these away, and everyone's like, they're getting thrown away.
Right.
And you have donors that say, what did you do with all these, could you use that to the end? And like, it's a mixed message.
Yeah.
It's one thing when PNC Bank changes and goes through, it's another when it's us.
Yeah.
And all of us are.
Well, the people that make their budget would say that's painful too, though, right? I mean, we talk to businesses of all sizes, and making a budget is a budget, right? And so it's just and I think everyone in this room and certainly business we talk to, they understand that why the investment is worth it. It's your marketing, branding, however you're going to tell your story. All of that's just like it should be like a line item, like every other thing you do in your business. It's really important. And I think that's what's super important about these workshops, if nothing else. I hope it gets everyone thinking about, okay, how can I put this into my world and into my budget? Because there is a cost to these things and it's valuable. That's why. And you just have to plan accordingly like any other expense. Yes.
And I think everyone in here is the same. We are extremely protective of our brand. We're extremely protective of our logo and our colors. Just recently, we ordered new shirts. We wear the foundation for our YAC and for our LEAF program. And the LEAF shirts came back because we had chosen some patches and some things. And as soon as we looked at them, I'm like, that's the wrong colors, right? It doesn't look right, and it doesn't represent who we are out in the community, and it's a local business, we feel bad, we feel bad. It was like, at the end of the day, we can't have this out in the community. We resolved the issue, but, I think our Midwest humble is like, oh, it's okay. I'm like, no, it's not okay.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah. Yeah. You can be Midwest polite about letting people know that that's not that you can just take your brand standard sheet in and say, "Sorry." Yeah. Yeah.
For me, I work at the foundation when we had the old antiquated logo with the acorns and it was very old school looking. I feel like with the new branding over the last 8 years, like any money that you put towards that has more than paid for itself. I
Yep.
will just say that. Like the initial investment in the rebranding might take a little bit, but once you do it, I feel like with the updated logo, it's fresher. I would say it even would appeal to maybe younger donors than what we typically had before. I feel like it was a very good investment, and now we can go out in the community, and I feel like we're very proud of, our logo and our message. So
Well, and a good, consistent, nice looking brand makes you proves to people that you know what you're doing, right? You're serious. And a lot of times, a lot of you are asking for large sums of money. And so, yes, while we are all Midwest humble, you still want to have your donors have confidence in who you are and that you take it just as seriously as they do.
Well, people's perception of you is kind of a reality, right? Like,
Mhm.
it might not be what is true, but if they view you in a certain way, that's just what it is. So, not rushing your brand, not rushing those things, I think are probably important as well.
Mhm. Definitely. Yep. That's why it does take months of time and why it shouldn't just be, like I said, in a silo, just creating a logo to create it. There's needs to be a reason behind everything that you're doing to ensure that it lasts and ensure that it's giving out the right impression. Mhm.
And I think it's important. I think there's businesses that go through this and nonprofits that go through this. They go through the brand and this is who they are, but they forget to leave out the outreach piece. Okay, hey, well, how am I getting this out in the community, right? Whether it's with events, whether it's with advertising, marketing. So remember that. Create that line item on there to, okay, what's going to be my outreach? What's going to be most effective for me with my core audience, my audience? And it might be like Jennifer, you mentioned, it's yeah, advertising is expensive, right? It's an investment, it's calculated investment, and those dollars should be working for you. For every dollar you're spending out in the community, should be 3, 4, 5, 6 to 1 minimum on your return that you're getting from that. Um, Sometimes you might have to start with just one thing and be consistent with that one thing and get that audience, whether it's with our newspaper, hey, own the audience, be consistent with that. And then when you're seeing a return and when you're growing a little bit more, hey, what's my next piece now? What else am I going to do? What else can I add to this mix? If you're choosing 6 or 7 things and doing a little bit of each and not owning one of those audiences, it's not going to work, especially with a limited budget. So with that limited budget, pick what you feel is going to be most targeted to your core audience and stick with that and own that audience before you try to do multiple different things.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. Thank you all.